And if you're able to stand. We acknowledge we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Miigwech. Thank you very much.
Excuse me for 1 minute. Can you send the link to Michelle Arts, please? Sorry.
Should I get started? I heard that the link is being sent to Trustee Arts.
Right, but she's not a member, Leola, so please go ahead.
Thank you very much. All right, good afternoon and happy Chinese New Year. The first order of business today is the election of a committee chair for the Bylaws Review Subcommittee. And I declare that nominations for the role of chair are now open. If there are any trustees who wish to nominate themselves, could you please say so? Thank you.
Yeah, can I nominate Trustee Laskin?
Trustee Laskin, do you accept this nomination?
I do, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any further nominations?
Just so I'm clear, who's here? Are Debbie and everyone's? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Are there any further nominations? If none? Okay, I now ask for a motion to declare the nominations closed.
Trustee Williams, I can move.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder?
Trustee King.
Thank you. All in favor?
In favor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Trustee Laskin has been elected chair of the Bylaws Review Committee, and I will now ask Trustee Laskin.
Thank you very much, Associate Director. Regarding today's meeting, I understand there would be no delegations. Is that correct? Thank you very much. So we're now, I think we have to have some key consensus decisions from this meeting. One would be how often we should be meeting and when we should be meeting. It would be great if we could have that discussion. And the other would be a preliminary discussion on the process. And I think, would we be relying on Mr. Plotnikoff or you, Ms. Pond, to lead us through that? Or is that just an open discussion? Or governance services?
I just wanted to point out, I'm sorry to interrupt, that we also need to decide on a vice chair, just in case.
All right.
Trustee Laskin, since you're assuming the chair, you're the one who is
Thank you very much.
asking for nomination.
Wonderful. So then the next item on the agenda, thank you, Governance Services, for making that clear, is there one of my colleagues, Trustee Williams, Trustee King, or Trustee McLean, who would like to serve as the vice chair on this committee? Is there one of my colleagues who may not want to serve as the vice chair of the committee, but would serve as the vice chair of the committee?
Yeah, McLean was happy to fill the role if needed.
Thank you, Trustee King. Trustee Williams, are either of you interested?
Thank you. Just to clarify, both the chair and the vice chair are required to appear in person. Is that correct?
No.
No, only the chair. However, if the chair is not available, we are asking the vice chair to do so.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I'm happy to see Trustee Laskin in the position of chair and Trustee McLean as vice chair.
Thank you very much. Would you like to move the nominations be closed for vice chair?
Yes, I'll move nominations be closed for vice chair.
Thank you very much. Trustee King, would you second that?
I will second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much to the committee. Thank you very much to Trustee McLean. Now will I turn it over to Associate Director Pon? Seeking some, I'm not 100% sure on how we have a discussion without the agenda. Because it just says process for review of bylaws, but there's no names attached to it.
Through the chair, I will suggest that the chair commence a discussion on, as you have noted, meeting frequency and process. In terms of staff availability, both several staff from the Policy Services Department will be available. They have assigned areas, so one will be supporting some the complaint process work, and the others will be supporting the bylaw work. So certainly policy services staff will be available at every single meeting. I am also available to attend all meetings if that's the wish of the committee to support in any fashion.
Thank you very much. If I can just have some clarification, because we will need staff available, is the preference or the possibility that we meet in the day and not in the evening? And I'd just like to survey the availability of committee members. I know we were able to do this Wednesday afternoon. I'm not clear if this is a good time for all members, given their work responsibilities. So I'm wondering the most appropriate way to do this, if board services should survey the four committee members in terms of their availability on which days and which times, because I think it would be wonderful if we could have a fairly regular schedule so that in our own calendars, we're not jumping all over the place. And I'm open to my colleagues' comments on that suggestion. If anyone has comments.
I'm okay with it's Trustee Williams. I'm okay with what's being proposed. It might allow for the consideration of dates and times instead of having the discussion here in a meeting.
Wonderful. Then I think we will do that. Associate Director, how often do you think, given the work ahead of us and the reporting timelines provided in the direction from the board, that we should be considering meeting? Would bi-weekly be appropriate?
Through the chair, if I could suggest initially bi-weekly to determine the complaint process under the updated board member code of conduct. And then thereafter, as your work continues with the bylaw, I would suggest maybe reconsidering a discussion with the trustees to determine meeting frequency. You do have a timeline of June, which, depending on the amount of potential bylaw changes that are required, may require more than monthly, in my view.
Thank you very much. So my understanding is the urgency is the complaint process itself.
Yes.
And so we would start off, if there's consensus from my colleagues, to try to have bi-weekly meetings at a time that works in our schedules. But to Trustee Williams' point, we would have to have some flexibility because some of us do work in other areas and have some things can come up time to time. So we would try to give at least 48 hours or appropriate in advance warning if we had to adjust any schedule. Does that make sense to the committee?
Works for me.
Then hearing
That's
no
fine
other
for me as well.
Oh, thank you very much. I assume silence is yes. And if people have an issue, you would just speak. We're fairly informal here because there's only four of us. Now, then in terms of the complaint process itself, Associate Director Pond, did you want to help guide us if that's going to be the topic of our next meeting? I'm assuming we would need some paper. I mean, there was a presentation included in the draft. It's our interim process.
Mhm.
But we would need some conversation about why it's only an interim process and some other issues vis-a-vis the legislation that what we're obligated to do and what we might choose to do as part of TDSB's code of conduct in terms of a complaint process. So I am wondering if you are comfortable beginning some of that conversation today, and then for the next meeting, perhaps outline some key points or some key options on paper to guide discussion. I'm not sure how my colleagues like to work, but I know for me, it's much easier to respond to something I see than to create or wordsmith. So I'm seeking your advice.
Thank you very much. We have done quite a bit of work in advance to allow this committee to launch at a more prepared state and not from zero. So we will have some materials in advance of your first meeting. We can certainly have a discussion at the very beginning in terms of what is required by law and what some of the proposed changes were that since have been accepted by the board. We should note that the new integrity commissioner complaint and the board code of conduct requirements are in effect already as of January 1st. Hence the need for a documented complaint process as soon as possible. And so one of the areas that in which we will likely be sharing at the very first meeting is a proposed complaint procedure. And that should be open for, of course, discussion for any member of the committee to revise. We will certainly provide information on what is actually required by the law and what may be optional as well. You will have seen through the GPC committee and the board meeting that changes were made to the board member code of conduct to align with the regulation. The regulation actually was quite prescriptive on the process that is needed, including timelines. And so much of the work that we've done so far is to capture that information into a draft complaint information, and we will convert it into a procedure so that the trustees on the subcommittee can work from. So more than happy to support the work of the committee, and we'll be ready at the first meeting with this information.
Thank you very much. Do my colleagues have any questions about what was just discussed in advance of our next meeting? I am hearing none. Can I just ask for one clarification, please? And that would be, I understand the regulation, but my understanding of the regulation and the complaints process was only trustee against trustee complaints. And that was our obligation. But because our board included all complaints, including from public and staff and trustees, with one complaint process, will you be bringing us differentiated complaint processes to discuss?
Through the chair, we can certainly provide some potential models to consider. And you are correct. TDSB actually had a integrity commissioner complaint process well before other school boards. So it has matured, and that included complaints from members of the public, from staff, of course, in addition to trustees. The regulation requires, at a minimum, that there be a complaint process for trustee to trustee complaints, sorry. But the regulation also allows local school boards to fashion their own integrity commissioner complaint process or complaint process generally, as long as it does not conflict with the rest of the regulation. And so the interim board member code of conduct that the board has passed includes keeping of the previous board member code of conduct provisions, which included public and staff, and married it with the new regulations. So certainly we can provide some information on potential avenues.
I'm not seeing questions from my other colleagues yet, so I'll just continue to ask some points of clarification. So does that mean, because the regulation was clear in terms of the public knowledge, the complaint would go to the board, et cetera? Does our process then right now, a member of the public can make a code complaint against a trustee, and the process that would follow is the new process, which means it would go to, like, a public member can make a complaint and it would go to the chair, and then it becomes public. A staff member makes a complaint, it goes to the chair, and that becomes public. It does not mean, just for a point of clarification, that the public would have to get a trustee to make the complaint for them against another trustee, or a staff member would have to get a trustee to make a complaint for them for another trustee. So if you could answer that, and then I'd like to go to Trustee Arts. I saw her hand. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excuse me, and through the chair. The current interim board member code of conduct, as it's written, does allow a member of the public and staff to forward a complaint to the chair, and under those circumstances, it does not require another trustee to essentially represent or sponsor the complaint.
Thank you very much. Trustee Arts.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So my understanding, and I don't have the wording in front of me right now, but my understanding of the new legislation was that although it says it's at a minimum, trustees make complaints against trustees, that there was an expectation that the public or staff could take a complaint to a trustee, and then the onus would be on that trustee to file the complaint via the chair. So I don't know exactly what that wording says, or how the expectation is framed. I just in some preliminary discussions, and then this discussion is this weekend at PES, there was a lot of concern expressed in maybe the legislation setting an expectation for the public to have a mechanism to complain, or staff to have a mechanism to complain through a trustee that then would, be dependent on who you actually approached. And so as boards are working through the protocols, some of the conversation was how to make this a consistent practice, so that it doesn't matter who you go to, and it's timely. That the opportunity for just differences in personality, or following protocols or not, might cause problems.
Thank you very much, Trustee Arts. So my reading of this for the Associate Director is to just make sure there's some clarity that we're independent to be able to make our process different from a public or a staff member having to go to a trustee first. Was that your comment?
Yeah, through the chair, the current wording allows a direct filing the complaint with the with the chair. Through the work of this committee, this can then be modified if you wish to have a trustee to represent or carry it for a member of the public. So this is why.
No, sorry.
So I think that was reversed. I think what Trustee Arts was saying, that her understanding based upon previous conversations and from OPSP on the weekend was that a member of the public or a staff member could not go directly to the chair.
Through the chair, that I was not involved in those discussions. I can certainly tell you that based on my reading of the legislation and the changes that have been approved by the board, currently that is the members of the public and the staff can't have the ability to send it directly to the chair.
Thank you. So that's one of the points that will be part of the consent process conversation. Trustee Williams?
Okay, thank you. And through the chair, I agree that we need to have like a really closer look at this, like the trustee to trustee and our current board process that allows public and staff. You know, I really think looking at those options of splitting those out. And also my question would be about like budgetary impacts. Um, because even though I haven't like looked too deeply into detail, my surface information is indicating when these complaints, code complaints, come to the chair and allowing for a 10-day or, you know, specified number of days to mediate, resolve before it goes on to the integrity commissioner. Once it's with the integrity commissioner, there's costs involved and costs involved if that needs to be appealed to, you know, an appellate body of integrity commissioners if that's part of the next process. So I think part of our conversation needs to also consider like the budgetary impacts to the board. Those were just my initial comments and question about you know, possible future costs.
Thank you very much. Associate Director, did you want to comment?
Through the chair, just very quickly in response, I agree, that's a very good point, and certainly will provide any information that we can and have available, including what we are aware of in terms of the budgets for the previous year's integrity commissioner's work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Trustee King or Trustee McLean, do you have any comments or questions at this time? Trustee McLean?
Yeah, thank you. And through the chair, I guess I'm interested in the budgetary concepts around, like, I understand who's going to pay the integrity commissioner. I'm interested in the costs of the tribunal that gets formed after if the decision isn't being accepted, and who pays for that. So I do think there are going to be some. I would like to at least fully understand the economic fallout of all of this as it pertains, so that when we're doing it and we're keeping in mind how open a process we're going to have, we should just understand if it's going to have, you know, if there's a price to pay, so to speak, we should at least be aware of it.
Thank you very much. Associate Director, anything further?
Sure. Through the chair, at this point in time, we have not yet received any information either directly from the ministry or through OPSPA or any other source on what this tribunal looks like, how school boards will be charged back if that is the case. So we will provide what we have, but just please do be aware that we actually don't have a lot of information at this point in time on the cost of the tribunal.
Thank you very much. Anything else, Trustee McLean, at this point?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Then Trustee King, did you have any comments before we wrap up this discussion?
Thank you. The only thing that comes to mind for me right now, and it might come out later in the process, is I'm just thinking of the multiple feedback that we've heard so far about concerns of potential misuse and abuse of the complaint process. And I'm wondering about thinking about how we record and are able to monitor or reflect as we need to for accountability on just some of the details. For instance, you know, who the complaints are being brought from and toward, any patterns of concern, just how we capture that in case we do ever need to reflect and address some concerns.
Thank you very much. Associate Director?
Through the chair, I've noted that as a topic for your discussion going forward. If I do recall, and I will try to look for this language, I believe the regulation does enable you to have provisions in the code that will allow the integrity commissioner to review a complaint and possibly dismiss it early if the integrity commissioner believes it was in bad faith or vexatious or abuse of the process.
Thank you very much. When you check that, can you also check if the chair has that ability before even putting it forward to the integrity commissioner?
Through the chair, I will. I don't believe the chair does, but I will double check that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. You read my mind with that follow-up. So let's add that to the list if it's not explicitly addressed.
Thank you very much. Trustee King, anything further?
No, I believe that's all for now.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else? Sorry, I can't see who's online. So is there anyone else? Pardon me? It's just Trustee Arts?
Trustee Arts.
Just Trustee Arts. And she made comments. So at this point,
Oh, no, I
appreciate
have another
everybody.
one. Sorry, I do have another
Please, please go
question.
ahead. Thank you.
So my understanding from discussions this weekend is that the province has not assembled their panel of commissioners. And so I think I'm assuming for us, because we have a contract, that our process will continue with our existing integrity commissioner. But I know this does leave currently other boards in limbo, like the policy took effect or the legislation took effect January 1st, but the province has not put their panel of integrity commissioners in place yet, and we don't know when they will be. And now they've called an election, so it's not clear when that's going to be done. So am I correct in assuming that our existing complaint, like our existing integrity commissioner, will continue to serve us until this becomes a panel thing?
Thank you very much for the question. I'll go to the Associate Director.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, we have a contract with the current integrity commissioner, and that we will continue to do that until the end of the contract, or if the contract's extended temporarily to facilitate the change. Please do recall that under the new procedure that has been adopted, a complaint goes from the school board to the integrity commissioner, who does the investigation, makes a finding, communicates the results. The tribunal or the three-person panel only comes into play if one of the parties appeals that decision. So at this point in time, we still have a contract with the integrity commissioner. We have no information on the approved list of integrity commissioners. My understanding, unless the Ministry of Education directs us otherwise, we will continue with our current integrity commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything further, Trustee Arts?
Yeah, I assume my understanding is there aren't very many in the province. There aren't many people who do this at all. So I don't think the pool's not very deep for the province. So my assumption will be that the people that are currently existing or currently serving as ICs for the boards across the province will be the people on the province's list. But thank you.
Thank you very much. Chair Shen, you had your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think I was just having a conversation earlier as well with the interim director. I think we'll have to discuss a little bit about the integrity commissioner and the role that they can play with some of the changes. So I think some of the things that we'll need to discuss in private around the contract pieces, but that might be relevant to this meeting. So maybe next meeting we can bring some updates on that.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure the associate director will speak with the interim director as the materials are being developed for the next meeting. Is there anyone else that has any other comments for Trustee Shan's, Trustee Hastings just came into the room. We were just having discussion about what materials we would be needing for a next meeting, just a general open discussion with an agreement that we're tackling the complaint process first, because that is a priority, because we have an interim code of conduct right now, and we just need to finalize that complaints process. And then we would be getting into the bylaws. There was also a general consensus that we'd be meeting every 2 weeks, especially because of the urgency of the complaint process. And then that could be adjusted depending on the amount of work that needs to be done on the bylaws. So that's where we're at. And we're basically at the end of that preliminary discussion, but I see Trustee Hastings has his hand up. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me the comment. I'm seeing bylaws.
Excuse me for 1 second. Is the mic on for Trustee Hastings? Yes, thank you. Please go ahead. It wasn't on earlier. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Well, there you go. I'm seeing bylaws popping up. And yes, I use the word and the phrase popping up. And they keep taking the elected member, us, 22, they keep taking us out of the loop. Can you explain that for me, Madam Chair?
I'm sorry, this is an open meeting that all participants can be at. At the last board meeting was asked for volunteers that would be on a bylaws subcommittee that would report through GPC and would report.
That is exactly what I'm asking, because.
Right, this is a bylaws subcommittee that was
It is a
duly
subcommittee.
Constituted by the board. Yes,
Thank
and it
you very
reports
much.
through GPC.
But what I'm seeing, and it will come up at the next board meeting, but I'd like for you or somebody to be able to tell me where are these amendments coming from? They're not coming from the government, because I've asked. They're coming from somewhere. We are no longer available to be talking with the, what do you call that? The gentleman that we normally go, the
Integrity Commissioner?
Thank you very much. The Integrity Commissioner. And I'm finding it a bit disconcerting, because we go to him, he comes to us, and we can't go to him again.
Just for clarification, and staff can confirm, we are absolutely still allowed to go to the Integrity Commissioner for advice. That has not changed. The changes through regulation and legislation compel us to change our code of conduct and some of our bylaws, and that's why the subcommittee is meeting. But if staff can confirm for me, our Integrity Commissioner is under contract. I do not believe the changes in the regulation or the legislation or interim process disallow us from seeking the advice of the Integrity Commissioner. Can that be confirmed, please, Associate Director Pon?
Through the chair, that's correct.
And that, through you, Madam Chair, is not the argument that I have. I'm looking at our authority as far as bylaws.
We have complete authority to set the bylaws for our board as long as they're consistent with the regulation and the legislation.
I'm looking at regulation, and regulation, I hate to say regulation be damned, but it's coming up that it says, this is the regulation, this is what we got to deal with. And we are being painted into a corner where regulation says this is happening, but I don't know where it's coming from. And it's not coming from, I thought it was coming from the government. I thought it was coming from senior staff, but it's coming from somewhere.
Forgive me, I'll ask the Associate Director to confirm, but yes, there have been changes for legislation and regulation. Our current bylaws were not in keeping with that regulation. Therefore, the board has the authority to set up a subcommittee through our existing bylaws to deal with the anomalies and make recommendations through GPC and to the board to ensure we will be in compliance. We have interim code of conduct right now because some of those regulations changed January 1st, but they are interim because of the extent and the changes in the process and the protocols. We have to adjust our complaint process to ensure we are in compliance, and that's why we're here. Associate Director, if you have anything to add, I would appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I do want to make sure we are clear about the two major priorities for the subcommittee. Of the changes that have been made through legislation and through the regulations under the Education Act, two major areas: the board member code of conduct, which now has a slightly different way of managing complaints that are coming in. We spent a lot of our time talking about that through the GPC meeting. The second area, which is not as time sensitive, but has a timeline, and it comes into effect in September of 2025, is the in-person meeting requirement that is imposed upon trustees. So effective September 1st, 2025, all trustees must attend regular meetings and meetings of the Committee of the Whole in person unless written approval is obtained by the chair to not attend in person for a list of reasons why, including, for example, health or medical reasons, family responsibilities, travel, excessive travel distances, and so on. So just going back to the original question from Trustee Hastings, all these changes are due to changes under the Education Act and a variety of regulations.
Through you, Madam Chair. I don't see this. I don't see it through, you call it legislation, and I really have a hard time seeing that. Where does it come from? Who? Because I do speak to people and I'm looking and I go through legislation. Where did that come from? And it didn't come from the government because
Sorry to interrupt. There was a report in our last Governance and Policy Committee meeting that explains the background and the context and the legislative changes that are requiring us to do work. It's in the agenda of the GPC meeting.
thank you very much, but I still don't see it.
Well, I would be happy to
Not a
send it
case
to you.
I didn't see it. I don't see where it's coming from. It's written. It is written, but I don't see where it's coming from. When I ask, we didn't do it. Nobody did it.
No problem, Trustee Hastings. I know we have ministry communication through OPSPA that we get in our legislative reports. I'll make sure I find the references to these so you can read the letters and share them after the meeting.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Anything further for anyone online? Thank you, Trustee McLean.
Thank you, and through the chair. And this is just my, my personal preference to this type of work, which I haven't been very involved with through my time on the board in terms of the governance and particularly by review, although I've attended some meetings. But it would be helpful for me at least to assume to proceed from a perspective that like a flow chart that started at the beginning of the process and had us decide exactly what the start of it would look like, and then kind of work our way through it so that we could maintain the logic and the approaches that we're deeming necessary, and we can build it as we're going through, as opposed to the last part might be easiest. Why don't we get that out of the way first and then work on the trickier parts at the end? For me, it would be an easier process for me to help to understand and to help build, if I understood what the driving logics and what we were trying, the choices we were making as we went along, and then having those be consistent as we were kind of reshaping it all throughout the process. So that's just an observation and a preference that I'll share.
Thank you very much, Trustee McLean. I will go to Mr. Plotnikoff. I believe you're online. I believe you did provide something similar at the beginning of the last governance subcommittee. And I'm wondering if we can rely on you to find that or put something together to address Trustee McLean's help that would be supportive for the work of this committee.
Absolutely. Through you, Madam Chair, we indeed developed a project timeline for the last bylaws review project, and included the sequence of tasks and the timelines and priorities. So we will definitely be happy to prepare such a document for this particular project. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Trustee McLean. I think that will really greatly aid in our work. Are there any other comments? Seeing and hearing none, a motion to adjourn, and committee members, please watch for the survey in terms of your the time and date of meetings, and then we can advertise it to the entire board.
Happy to move, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Trustee McLean. Any
Seconding.
seconder?
Trustee
Thank
King?
you. Thank you, Trustee King. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thank you to staff, and we'll look forward to gathering again.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you all.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.